curious to know, why do you think the market can't see what we Tesla investors see when it comes down to Tesla's method of vision only compared to LiDAR?
When people hear what Tesla has done, people could read every single one of my technical articles on it and still not build a system even close to what they have. It is possible that the stock could be 20x where it is today. This would be like seeing the iPhone moment and discarding Apple because you think they're a personal computer company. Tesla is transitioning its business dramatically from auto to autonomy. There's a good chance that Tesla will not sell autos to consumers in a number of years from now. The business will be too small. Just imagine you walk out of your favorite restaurant and there's 3, 4, 5, 6 Cybercabs just sitting there. You're not even calling them. You're just getting in them like a cab at an airport, the old model. You start to see the rollout and you start to see dramatic revenue and at very high margin revenue starting to come in. And what do you do then? I mean, now you're stuck. You can't value it as an auto company anymore. You have a whole different way of looking at the company. And you can't fight that once that happens.
Welcome everybody, and welcome back to another podcast. Today we have someone special, Phil Beisel. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. We know you're known for making these awesome articles on X. Elon has commented on them. They've liked them. He's reposted them. And I quite frankly find them very interesting and very useful. And so, I clicked on your name and you are a ex-Apple employee.
Indeed.
And a executive, and a ex-Rivian, I think it was a founder, tech team founder, which is,
tech team
tech team founder, that's the one, which is pretty interesting. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think there's a lot of value here to be unfolded. And I am a follower of Phil. Amazing content. His X is in the description. I recommend everybody to go follow him because he has some really good stuff. So Phil, tell us your time and role in Apple and Rivian.
Sure. Yeah. So I worked at Apple actually twice in my life. It was my first job after college and my last job before Rivian. And right before Rivian, I worked at Apple as an engineering manager, doing various projects on server side. So nothing directly visible to the consumer. I joined Rivian in 2017 as a founder of the tech team. So I think Rivian at the time was about 50 people and scaled pretty quickly. There was a point where Rivian was ready to scale. My role there was to essentially develop the tech stack, what we might call software-defined architecture of the vehicle. Now, my side was software, so I ran the applications team, which was responsible for the application framework of the car and all the apps there within. I also ran the mobile applications team, which is the mobile application, and I ran the Rivian Cloud team, which is responsible for vehicle data. Now, I didn't do those to the finish line. I each of these. So really, in a sense, what I did was I founded these teams, built them to some scale. Eventually, my last role at Rivian was I ran a futures team, which was very different. I took a kind of a right-hand turn and just focused on future technologies and different ways of different business models for the company. It was really, really exciting opportunity. It was a great opportunity. I was really appreciative that RJ gave me that opportunity. Really great man. And we really had kind of free reign to define the vehicle architecture from a hardware point of view, network architecture, and the software. Yeah, we developed our own in-house ECUs. Did our own design, hardware architecture design. We did our own software, pretty much very first principles, very Tesla-like engineering team and project. So it was really, really exciting to get in on the ground floor. And then I think when I started at Rivian, we were about 50 or so employees. When I left Rivian, we were about 14,000 employees. So Rivian, really was about scaling fast. I mean, pretty much had to tackle the market as quickly as it possibly could. So we ended up delivering 3 different vehicles on 2 vehicle platforms in 5 years. which is really
Wow.
outstanding. I mean, probably never been done before. So there was the consumer vehicle platform, the R1 platform, which produced the R1T, the truck, and then the SUV, the R1S. And then there was the commercial platform known as the EDV, which is used as an Amazon delivery van, and then is sold as a general purpose, platform for either either delivery or service.
Which is very smart on them, to be honest.
Well, it was also important because it came with a very large chunk of money from Amazon.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in the early days, we were initially funded by a Saudi company, and then
Really?
yeah,
I did
ALJ,
not know that.
yeah, ALJ,
Huh.
and I think it's ALJ. Hope I got my letters right. It's been a while since I've said that.
Okay.
But somebody that one of the sons of the founders that was very friendly with RJ went to MIT with RJ. So and then the large chunk of money came in from Amazon. Jeff Bezos came out to visit and decided that he liked what he saw and became very friendly with RJ. And I think he became somewhat of a mentor to RJ and made a sizable investment, which secured the delivery platform, because he wanted to electrify that. And he also was very encouraging of the consumer platform as well. Yeah, so it was fantastic ride, and we developed stuff from the ground up and made our great share of mistakes and had our great share of successes, and ran at a crazy pace. It was like trying to build a development organization and develop with little settle time. People are coming in all the time and trying to build these different aspects. And each one was, you start with the vehicle itself and you develop that platform for the vehicle, but then you realize that it's not an island. It needs a sizable effort in building a mobile app that connects to the vehicle, acts as a key to the vehicle.
Same
And
with
then
Tesla.
yeah, and exactly. And then also requires a large cloud infrastructure to support telemetry off the vehicle, as well as kind of the glue between the remote use cases like vehicle app to cloud to vehicle, interaction.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, we literally built a big data system for the company to take as much vehicle data as we were willing to take off vehicle and settle it in the cloud. And then, you can use that data set as for, oh my God, so many use cases. It's really, from service to reliability to competitive analysis to, I mean, it's really incredible when you have that amount of data.
That's incredible. So you and the tech team founder pretty much made this whole software.
Yeah, I mean, we started with a small team. I was mostly focused initially on applications, which are both in vehicle and mobile. I then founded the cloud team. We also had an embedded software team and a hardware team, and all those things grew, somewhat separately, over time. And embedded is all about taking a potential an operating system like Linux or Android and settling it on the hardware in a proper way and giving a platform for the application side so that, my team could work above that. It's really quite a process because, in the beginning of time, you want these teams to run in parallel. And so you have to bootstrap the team without necessarily having the layer below you. So the applications team started building the in-car system on Mac, just with the Mac software development model. It took a while for the embedded team to even bring up a reference board for us before. And then it took a long time till we had our own hardware because the hardware team was busy, doing layout and working through that part. And the cloud team, we had a cloud team set up to accept vehicle data before we had a vehicle to provide the data. So we built essentially simulators to simulate. In the beginning of time, it's kind of interesting. If you go back in the early days of Rivian, we had all these simulators. I remember RJ looking at one of these displays and saying, "What am I looking at?" And I said, "It's kind of a big display of all these vehicles. And I said, well, you're looking at a bunch of vehicles providing data to the cloud and at a high data rate. And he said, but I have no vehicles. I said, yeah, right. These are just simulated vehicles. And then what we were able to do is leg in, first when you do a vehicle development, you basically start layering hardware on top of what, or any functional stuff on top of what would be called a platform we called a mule. So that's basically a bit of a, what is a mule? It's a bit of a Frankenstein project. You might take a car from Ford, and then you would retrofit that car with some of your hardware, and then you might end up with a reasonable body design and a prototype of the car that you're actually building, and you're layering in first generation hardware. It's a process that takes a long time. We did this great project 2018, I believe, called The Long Way Up, which was a TV program with Ian McGregor. What he had done with this program was I think he had The Long Way Around, The Long Way Down. It was him and his lifelong friend Charlie, and they would take these motorcycle trips across, like from England to the tip of South Africa. And The Long Way Up, the project we did with them is they were taking electric motorcycles, Harley Davidson, I think they were called Live Wires. I can't remember the brand or name, and taken from the tip of South America to LA. And we joined that project with 2 prototype Rivians. And so my team layered in initial hardware, and we were able to offload data off these vehicles through roaming cellular, as well as dedicated satellite data transmission. This is before Starlink was available, so it was a Hughes satellite, HughesNet, and that was cool because we were able to collect thousands and thousands of data points off the car. I think over the 2 cars, about 800,000 GPS points per car. Literally mapping the car. We knew where the cars were at all time, and we are literally able to remote load software on the cars in the most remote places you could imagine, like the salt flats of Peru at 11,000 feet of elevation. And, we're literally loading software on the cars as they're moving. It's very cool. It's a lot of fun.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So you have a lot of experience when it comes down to software. So this is going to be a lot of fun when we talk about Tesla's full self-driving and robotaxis, and what you see in it and what you think about it. It's going to be very interesting. Now, the only question I have is, with all the software that you worked on for Rivian, is there a software that is particular to solving solving full self-driving for Rivian, or are they not in that field at all?
The ADAS team, autonomy team, was a sister team to my team. It was kind of organized separately, and they're in that game. And
so they are, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know their exact current strategy, although I have some sense of it. But the idea was, it was when we started doing this, it was very nascent. And it wasn't as if there's a blueprint for this. And, it was really trying to climb the 5 levels of autonomy, and try to level 1 to level 5 and try to layer those features along a release timeline. So today, Rivian has, I can't say how they call it, what level they call it, but they have highway assist driving with full lane change. So it's sort of, I think RJ's referred to it as a ramp to ramp strategy, as opposed to directly from, say, home to some destination. It's sort of, once you enter the highway, the car will drive autonomously. It's a different, and just to point out again, this was a sister team to my team. I was just tangentially associated with that team. They in the early days, they developed their own hardware. It's like if you, with all the moving parts of a company and the velocity that Rivian was going, you somewhat develop an architecture by organization to a certain extent. So the ADAS team, the autonomy team, was acting somewhat autonomously, and they're built their own hardware team. They kind of built their own vertical on, from hardware to software, selecting an RTOS for the system, and then building their software. And so while we communicated to them quite regularly, because ultimately their hardware fit within the overall network architecture, and the data emitted from those systems made their way across the network architecture to the telematics unit, to the Rivian Cloud, the team that, I did for data. So in close communication, but not my responsibility, clearly.
I see. I see. Okay, so I guess they're not too into it like how Tesla is well, that's their main goal right now. So I guess the last question I have here with the Rivian and stuff, I know you weren't responsible for that, but are they using Lidar to do this, or is it neural nets, or just
Yeah,
regular software?
I can and shouldn't comment on their current strategy or technology, other than to say that I think that they're more closely aligned to Tesla than any other player,
Okay.
in terms of a camera heavy and AI approach. So I think they filtered that out through the years. I mean, like I said, when we started those projects, it was very nascent. It was new. It was new to everyone. 2017, 18 timeframe.
Yeah.
So that team was building cars with lidars and radars and ultrasounds and cameras to test out multiple sensors, a sensor fusion model, et cetera, et cetera. And then, they distilled that to more of a camera-based approach for highway driving. And I don't know what their current strategy is. Often when we think of a Tesla vehicle and we think of the tech stack in the vehicle, our brains run right to FSD. But the truth of the matter is, there's a huge architecture within that car that, if you remove FSD, sans FSD, you've got the whole infotainment data and network architecture, OTA architecture for updates. So that's sort of where my focus was on Rivian, on that side of the equation, which, I think I wouldn't try to really net it out as to what size the efforts are, but to do what I'm talking about is quite a sizable team and effort.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. It's an ocean of experience that you've gone through with software, which is amazing. Which I'm very curious to know, like how did you become a heavy Tesla investor? If you, I mean, I mean, from Rivian, from building the software from scratch to where it is now, but then you still became a heavy Tesla investor. So that is very, very interesting.
Well, I mean, the thing is that I think Rivian never really saw Tesla as, I mean, it's obviously competitor because they sell automobiles to individuals, but we as a team never looked at Tesla, and we never thought about trying to copy paste their architecture or their model. We never really, I mean, we hired a lot of Tesla folks that, I mean, and this happens it's very typical in technology people. And it's not really necessarily that someone is disgruntled at Tesla and they want to leave. And it's sometimes just people are looking for a career change, or looking for maybe a little bit more upward mobility because they're kind of locked behind a certain set of managers that are maybe at Tesla, and looking for some new opportunity. So we hired a bunch of those individuals, but I think it was very clear philosophically that we're not there to copy what Tesla was doing. We were there to try to build a first principles approach to solving our set of problems. Now, a lot of the things end up looking alike because, there's only so many ways that you might do things in a vehicle, but there's a lot of differences in the Rivian versus Teslas. Now, how did I become the Tesla investor? Well, first off, I have a great deal of respect for Elon as somebody who spent my life in engineering disciplines and always on the cutting edge. He's my kind of person. It's like my idols are Steve Jobs and Elon Musk to a certain extent, because I love the way they think about problems. It's the way I try to think about problems. And I say try, in the sense that taking a first principles approach, taking, not really following anybody, but leading on your own, willing to take heavy risk for
Mm.
big reward. And I've watched Elon. I mean, I love all things SpaceX. So
I see a
and
SpaceX shirt. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's something I find to be really interesting, and I agree with his goals and his mission there. Tesla to me became more interesting, not because of like I could build I could build a pathway, an easy pathway, a bridge, in my brain technologically to the vehicle platform. But honestly, the reason I'm mostly interested in Tesla is because of Optimus.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
mean, I love the idea of where they're headed with vehicle transportation as a service. I really think where they're leaning in on autonomy and getting away from just, slogging vehicles out there, pieces of metal, is the right strategy for the company. But I mostly became deeply interested in the opportunity of Optimus, both from as a technology platform, but also just from a market opportunity. And I looked at the company and I said, none of these things, when I started investing, none of these things were even close to being priced in. Um, so it just became obvious to me. Now I know, I always think of Tesla as a bit of a company that's a lightning rod, meaning it's like it's never quiet. It has a founder that
Mm.
is quite quite known, quite out there in terms of opinions and so forth, and that's fine. I mean, I agree with probably most of his opinions, but it just becomes a company that will have a lot of ups and downs, but the long term trajectory, and as an individual retail investor, the long term is all I really have. I'm not a stock trader. I would not do
Mhm.
very well. I'm looking at a 5 to 10 year horizon, and I'm looking at 5 to 10x multiple on that stock. I mean, it's almost a sure thing in my brain. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of rough patches along the way, and retreats and retreads, but it's really, if you look at the long term trajectory and you look at there is no, in a simple way of saying it, there is no company of Tesla's size that has the product pipeline it has. I mean, if you look at in terms of energy, transportation, labor, all those categories, all the major categories of how we will define future on this planet are products in the pipeline at Tesla. I'm a pretty big fan of Apple, but I see it, you know, sort of languishing at this moment and not,
Mm.
you know, I mean, in simple terms, I could see Apple being 2 times its value in 5 years. But if that's its trajectory, then Tesla would be 10 times
Right.
because of what Tesla
Yes.
has. So, and I think, my appraisal of this is like, there are people that will be online and they'll say, you're a Tesla fanboy. And I'm like, I don't really understand. Yeah, it's a very weird thing for me because I don't understand. Like, there's nothing that drew me there other than facts.
Yep.
And and I think coming from Rivian is just sort of gives you a sense of the authenticity of my purpose, because I have literally nothing against Rivian. I hope the greatest success, and I own a lot of stock in Rivian, and I think the founder is a terrific person. But I'm trying to lean in on different places of tech.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of people out there that have said for many years, and it's always the loud minority, is what I always say. There's always loud minority. One thing's for sure is that when you look at Tesla and see what they're doing with all their software, and I'll be asking you for this as well, but when you look at what they're doing, it's and how fast they're going forward, and how advanced their technology is, it's very hard to bet against. It really is. And it doesn't take a genius to see it. You just got to do a little bit of research, and you can see exactly what they're doing. That's the part. Like,
Uh,
one thing that I want to say is that a lot of these guys would come out and say like things like, oh, the Cybertruck, where was a Cybertruck, for the past 4 years? And then when the Cybertruck is here, they move on to the next thing. Oh, where's the Roadster, and where's going to be the Cybercab, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's just noise. I've started investing in Tesla in 2020, and I knew there was a lot of things. I mean, I'm sure you've been a longer investor than I have. You learn to differentiate the noise from the signal.
Yeah,
And then
you
once
have
you
to,
do that,
right.
you're good to go.
It's, I mean, if you look at the noise around, principal noise around Elon is just his attachment to the Trump administration, and anybody that isn't into that is just going to pillar him as well, regardless of what he's doing. If he did the same exact role with Doge under the Biden administration, people would love him. Or I should say, people on that side of the aisle would love him. So it's all fake. None of this is, and I think that the real thing is if you really step back and you think about what are the forces against Tesla specifically, largely they're upsetting the incumbency. Here's a company that is about to disrupt most major industries on the planet. Okay. When you have that kind of situation, everybody's going to fight against that. If they don't have game
Oh, yeah.
in that area, and they're currently very profitable in, in the current situation, current game, whatever that is for that product, then they're going to fight against you tooth and nail. And they're not going to come straight at you and say, hey, we're not interested, we're oil and gas and we hate the energy business that you're creating. They're going to come at you with a bunch of FUD and other types of things. But in the long term, none of this matters.
Yes.
I have a document that I keep as from an investor point of view. I have this document, and it's meaningful to me. It's just called "The Darkness Before the Dawn," and I label dates and events where headline news is so, oh my God, this, and the whole point of it is to go back a month later, reread what happened on March 17th and realize that it was just completely noise and no one's even talking. I mean, we move at an incredibly high velocity in the news cycle because of the way the world is connected these days. But I mean, like, I wrote things down about vandalism of Tesla cars out of pure silliness, and we don't even really hear about that much anymore. It's certainly not top of mind. And so that's what you need to do as a retail investor. You need to take the long term. You need to try to look at signal through noise, and you really need to realize that noise is your opportunity. And you have to have a pretty strong constitution to be able to deal with it sometimes. But if you were to simply put money into Tesla and go to sleep for 10 years and wake up and didn't carry any of the emotional baggage of that, your investment is probably very sound. So I'm not saying that I'm immune to that. I mean, we're all immune to the emotions of the day, and we see that. But if you just step back and you say, where is this going to look? What is this going to look like a year from now? Are we still going to be talking about this silliness? No, of course not. I mean, the second Robotaxi starts deploying and get some traction and things start going well, there'll be a lot of negative headlines to start. I'm sure there'll be something.
Oh, yeah.
But once it starts to gain traction, I mean, we'll look back and say, who thought that FSD wasn't going to work? People still talk about that constantly, like, FSD is not going to work. It can't work. And I'm like, yeah, I just, I've written a lot about this because I don't even, it's hard for me to understand why people think the way they do. A lot of them are just armchair engineers. I mean, they come to bear with a point of view that isn't necessarily, it's based on their emotions and their ideology and a bunch of other things. And then they start armchair engineering and pretending that they understand, and they've never done, any work on hardware or software or the processes thereof. And they invent this reality that is very far away from truth.
That's the one thing that I tell everybody on this channel. If you could just invest and not get emotional about it and just invest for the long term, you're going to be okay. And, I do want to ask this because you're older than me and you've been in Apple. In Apple stock in 2006, 2007, before or I think it was at the time when they unleashed the iPhone, was the stock as volatile as Tesla today?
No, I don't think so.
Really?
Okay. I think there's some key differences. I think we're in a different time. I think information is traveling at massive breakneck speed, and I mean, look, when I was a kid and I invested in stocks, I would pick up the Wall Street Journal and look at the previous day's price. There was not even anything filtering across. There was no, Yahoo. There was nothing that showed stock prices online. There were no online platforms. You called a broker, and
No
all of
pre-market,
that.
aftermarket, no
Yeah,
options, nothing.
exactly. And all of that stuff led to less volatility, and to a
That's
certain
true.
extent, because the information. I mean, if you have a stock that has a lot of retail percent wise, investors in it, you're gonna see that volatility. And like I said, you have a founder of Tesla that is literally one of the most recognizable names on planet Earth, and
Mhm.
is moving multiple balls in different disciplines that affects the world at large in many different ways, and that's going to lead to volatility. It's going to lead to these incumbents to push against, and negative stories to be run, and all sorts of stuff. So no, I mean, the simple answer to your question is no. I think
Mm.
you've invested in Apple back in 2007 timeframe, and you just kind of it was relatively quiet. I mean, people talked a lot about the iPhone, and if you look at the time when Steve was at Apple, it was like he was sort of like a cult of personality person, like
Mm.
Elon, whereas Tim Cook is more of just an operator, and no one goes to him for, like, Tim doesn't put it out there. He's
Yeah,
always, happy
he's a good
teacher's day,
executor.
and yeah, he's an executor, and he kind of lays back on commentary about
Mm.
world issues or
Innovation.
whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, he just says nice things about stuff. But Steve, if you think about Steve Jobs really stayed within his wheelhouse. So, like, he kept his opinions to himself. We don't know his politics per se. We don't know, where he didn't really opine on the trajectory of the world or any kind of real. He focused really on his products. And I know that
Yes.
there's a lot of people that are Tesla investors wish that Elon would do that, but that's not Elon. So don't
It's not
don't
Elon.
be, it's very simple. Don't invest in Tesla if you think that that's a problem, because you're just going to be disappointed. I mean, the people would say, "Oh, look how much time he spends at Doge," but nobody complained that he's spending as much time at SpaceX.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
Ironically, yeah.
That's
But I
the
mean,
point that I tried to make too.
yeah. But I mean, Steve stuck to Apple. I mean, Steve would talk about the product landscape, the consumer product landscape. He would talk about Apple products, but he kind of stuck to Apple. You don't see a lot of, outside a few moments, like his Stanford speech, graduation speech, and a few. He barely spoke at the global level. So I think that tamped down a lot of potential
Attempt down a lot.
volatility. Yeah,
Yeah. Steve Jobs, he stayed in his lane, and
he
but
stayed in his lane.
Elon Musk would go to many lanes.
They're different. They're different people, and both are respected highly. From my point of view, respect them greatly. But they have their faults, and they have their strengths. And Elon is Elon. So if you don't want that, don't. There's plenty of places to put your money.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. It's Elon Musk is one character in the actual volatility of the stock, which is, you know, it comes with the package. You have to agree with it. You have to come in terms with it, and you have to
Right.
stomach it. I mean, we saw what happened with the Trump pump. Has nothing to do with the financials of Tesla, and it doubled. And
Right.
for the same reason, it went back down to what it was before, the elections. So
That's right.
that's how the stock moves, and you just have to stomach the volatility.
I
Now,
think that what you'll see, the greatest stock appreciation we're going to see the stock move mostly when we see revenues behind the products,
yes,
right? I
and
mean, we can talk all day about the promising future of transportation as a service with Robotaxi, or labor as a service with Optimus, but what the investment community wants to see, and what will drag it across, what will start that FOMO moment where we start to see the pull, it could happen way in advance, because people can see, they're betting, they're taking a future bet. But when you look at, say, NVIDIA's greatest rise when it started to rise is that it was really,
Mhm.
I think it was like the third quarter of insane growth, and
Oh
people
yeah.
realized it was not a one-off, and that it was really the founder speaking about the future of AI and the compute required was a true story. You know, it was an
Yep.
accelerating story, and but this is why, you know, you can't, in my opinion. Now, look, I'm nothing more than a retail investor, puts money in and kind of forgets about it. So I wouldn't trade the stock because I don't do any of that. But I'd say you can't time this. I mean, June could cause an acceleration of Tesla stock back to the close to 500 range for all we know,
Mhm.
but it also could bring it back down after a few negative stories.
Yeah.
But what happens when Austin is successful and the rest of the city sort of, you know, you start to see the rollout and you start to see dramatic revenue and at, you know, very high margin revenue starting to come in. And I mean, what do you do then? I mean, now you're stuck. You can't value it as an auto company anymore. You have a whole different
Mhm.
way of looking at the company, and
Exactly.
so and you can't fight that once that happens. So I'm like, kind of, my investment thesis is get in before get in early enough before the revenue shows up or the fear of missing out on that revenue line shows up.
Yep.
And I think, you know, for me, that's been the last year plus.
Yep. I know Elon, he talked about in the Q1 earnings saying that, we will see significant earnings in Q2 or second half
Mm.
of
I
2026.
I think, yeah, somewhere in the mid part of
Yeah.
2026, you'll see, you know, a reasonable building revenue line associated with Robotaxi, right?
I think, and that's when everyone will realize that. I mean, analysts will have to, after June, I would say October in Q3 earnings, when there is some data out in terms of earnings and the profits of it. But mainly, I think in Q4 of 2025, when there's more data, they can rely on what the growth would be. And I think there will be a proper guidance for robotaxis
Mm.
in terms of profits and growth. And I think Wall Street will really like that. And well, they have to add it in the little spreadsheets. And when they do that, well,
Right.
higher EPS, higher the
Yeah.
valuation of the company. So it's very exciting stuff. And you wrote an article just literally right before this
Yeah.
podcast,
Right. I did.
and you called it the Robotaxi Rodeo Austin City Limits,
Yeah.
and you broke it down. And I read the whole thing, but essentially, it's your realistic thoughts on how Robotaxi launch will go down. So let's talk about that. How do you think they're going to launch it, and how do you think they're going to expand it to other cities and all?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think the big step back here is this has been in the planning process for a very long time at Tesla. In a sense, if you think about it, they've been waiting for FSD to mature and to get to that point of what I call convergence, meaning that you have enough compute and you have enough technique in your AI that you're going to see it converge on solution. And what that really means is that FSD becomes much safer than the human driver, you know. And the way I'm analyzing that is it's merely a compute bound problem at this point. So it's basically the problem is really on constraint of compute. So and Tesla's obviously doing enormous things in moving their compute capability capacity up. So if you step back and you think about it, they've been planning this for a very long time. They probably had the ride matching application infrastructure and
Mhm.
app running, could be 2 years ago. I mean, who knows? I can't say, but I mean, a lot has changed and a lot of things can be changed. And if you built that a while ago, you would do some different stuff now. But the point is, they've been maturing this and they've clearly built a program. And what I was trying to do in this article was take the reader through the journey of what it's like to build a large scale program like this without too much detail and boring stuff. But it's not to say you go, I mean, the whole point of the article is that you don't go from 0 to 1 in an instant. You go through a series of doors, and you know, to most people would understand that they think of Robotaxi as finally the ultimate no limits scale solution to rideshare, right? You're not stuck behind trying to supply drivers into a system like Uber or Lyft. You're not stuck behind retrofitting other companies' vehicles with hardware like a Waymo. And you have really built this for volume production of these robotaxi vehicles at lower cost. So you built this business for scale. You've designed, or a better way of saying is you've designed the business model, the business for scale, but you don't start that way. And what I think we're going to see in June is frankly going to be very underwhelming. It's not going to be some big splash where there's thousands of cars suddenly taking on and taking over all the Uber rides. I think it's really what I'm saying in the article. It is a trial. It is a process where they're going to move from their own test operators, which they have many on the ground today in Austin. They've said as much and people have observed as much. And they're going to move to a process where they're going to throw out 10, 15, 20 cars on day one, whenever that is, hopefully in June. And they're going to see how it goes, frankly. And they're going to address situations. They're going to address their errors, their problems, and they're going to then start to scale that. It's if you think about every single thing Elon has ever done from an engineering perspective is in kind with that philosophy. It is that, you build a fail fast model. That isn't to say, and I don't want the takeaway to be that there's any kind of sense that they're not concerned about safety. That's probably their number one concern is passenger safety. But what it is that they want to dip their toe in the water. They want to see how this thing performs. I mean, hey, they're probably pretty confident. I can give you a couple of reasons why I think they're very confident. But the real world is different, and real passengers are different. And once they dip their toe in the water, then they'll move on from what I call the phase one program, which is a very limited trial in Austin. And they'll start to scale it out to multi-city. And then once they get to that point, then it's really a scale out solution, right? There's really nothing to hold them back from it's really process of, because they built the scale solution, then it's really just a process of producing a lot of vehicles. At the end of the day, right? And service charge centers and so forth. But so I think that's the point of the article, is to take the reader through this process and try to create the understanding that the beginning of this is very slow, methodical, very manual, ground game stuff, see how it operates, fix issues, and get back at it. And because really it's only theory until you get a real passenger in the car.
And as you mentioned, they're built for scale. So as soon as they get through all these hurdles and everything seems to be, let's say 99.99% good to go, it's literally an overnight thing. We're going to see a lot of robotaxis happen,
right?
Which is incredible.
Yeah,
that's the part where I'm looking forward to the most.
Think about the kind of a analogy here with SpaceX, right? Falcon launches in the beginning of time were few and far between. Obviously, in this case, a lot of them literally crashed. They had in the first year when they were commercial, there was 2 launches. I may have my facts wrong, but I'm not off by too much. And now they've done, 400 launches this year, or will do. They'll move 90% of all payload to space, whether it's commercial or country driven. So what's going to happen here is going to creep up on us. And what they've done with SpaceX in that case is they built a reusable rocket. What they're doing with Robotaxi is they're building a car that they can produce at the lowest potential cost, at the highest potential volume. And that is impossible for the competitive matrix out there to keep up. So once they can turn on the scale, the accelerator button, then they're off to the races. That's, things are happening parallel here. So, they're perfecting their process of building cybercab at scale. But when they reach that and they are producing cars at some blistering pace of every 5 seconds or so, which is really you can't even really understand that.
I can't. That's the part.
Yeah, it's like you're, yeah, it's a crazy thought. But Tesla have the capability of pushing, 1,000 cars a day into into this business. And there's another article that I did called the Robotaxi Drive-By, and I was some people didn't get the title, but the idea is, like a drive-by is that you don't see it coming. What I was trying to do is layer out like how much of this is going to change the way we perceive how we move around.
Yep.
And there's so many impactful changes. What people generally don't see in products is they tend to draw a line linearly, not only on the product itself, but if it's a platform, it changes a lot more things around it. I mean, for example, if iPhone didn't exist, we wouldn't have Uber. We wouldn't have Airbnb. We wouldn't have, because there'd be nothing to glue the customer to the service, right? We had
That's
to.
right.
So whole industries are created out of these types of platforms.
Absolutely.
And they changed the way we do things. And so I think Robotaxi will be like that too, because it's a scalable, no limit solution. It will change, I suspect in some number of years, I don't need to put a timeline on it, but I suspect more cybercabs will be seen than most cars.
Oh, yeah. I agree with that. One of my thesis is, and I say it multiple times on my channel, and I believe it, is that 10, 15, 20 years down the line, car ownership would not be a thing anymore.
No.
It just won't, because robotaxis will be much cheaper, less headache, and they'll be everywhere. Why do you want to own a car?
Yeah, it's very weird for people to make these transitions out of things that are been part of their lives.
Yeah.
For example, just take the simpler aspect of this. Why do you want to drive a car?
Exactly.
When you start using something like FSD in the car, there are times when you really like to drive a car. It's kind of fun and it's nice. But there's also kind of times when you want to just go take a horse and run around in the hills. That has nothing to do with the functional aspect of it. I mean, nobody would probably say, I love to drive my car in my morning commute bumper to bumper to work. I mean, that's not something, right? So imagine what that's going to do and how it's going to change people's behavior, and where they get time back. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see that because you don't, like with Robotaxi, I think your consumers are so used to owning cars.
Yeah.
But the thing is that also there are these shifts, and if you look at the total addressable market, you look at vehicle, the thing is that there's shifting demographics, and really another way to say it is there are old people that are dying and there are new people that are coming about, and they take a different view of, a lot of younger kids aren't as focused in the US and trying to get their license on day one.
That's right.
It's not as important, which is crazy from my brain, because I'm like, oh my God, I wanted that freedom of I was trying to get my license before it was available. So
even me when I turned 18 in Canada, or it was a 16, we can start taking our driver's license application when we're 16. For the first day I went there. But today, when I hear about people getting their license, kids getting their license when they turn 16, they don't.
Right.
They delay it, or they're just not as interested because they have Uber and other things that they just go around.
Yeah, there's a convenience of service, and there's also, I mean, owning a car, it's like, for most people, it's a huge capital expense, and it's also, I mean, as we're talking, both of my cars, I have a Rivian, I have a Tesla. This is sitting idle, not doing anything. I'm still paying for them. Really, what it comes down to is how convenient are these services. But just imagine you walk out of your favorite restaurant and there's 3, 4, 5, 6 cybercabs just sitting there. You're not even calling them. You're just getting in them like a cab at an airport, the old model. It's funny. I think things will come full circle there. I think that you'll just have a natural number of these lining up outside of events, airports, and then smaller things, restaurants and other places that people congregate in. You'll literally step in. It'll immediately know who you are by the fact that you have your phone with you. It's almost like a mobile key to the service without the need to call up the service and match license plates and all this garbage will probably, I mean, that'll all happen if you need to call one till you say you're home, or someplace, but if you'll see them lined up everywhere. I think that's what Elon's goal is really high availability service, a very high. I mean, if there are a lot of times when, I mean, you've experienced this, major cities trying to get an Uber when there's a busy event, which is why you may be there in the first place. You might have a 20, 30, 40-minute wait.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the points you mentioned is Elon's goals to get this service out. I 100% agree. And it also aligns with the mission statement, transitioning the world to sustainable energy. And the way to do that is to limit car ownership in a way, because if other companies cannot make a profitable EV, and if they can't have any capabilities of full self-driving in the next 5 years, nobody's going to be buying those cars. It's just, it's very scary when you think about it, that all these other automakers are not, or trying to get ahead. It's really scary to see it. Now, maybe Tesla will license out their full self-driving in the future. I'm not too sure, but why would they, other than just being nice?
Yeah, I'd say it would be a headache for them to do so. No, I mean, I think it's legacy auto is dead. They just don't know they're dead.
I agree.
They are, what's going to really catalyze EV adoption is going to be Robotaxi. I think if you look at the natural charts of, say, EV adoption, all these technologies follow obviously S curves of adoption, right? And the flat part of the S can take a very, very long time. And I think the reasonable cross point when, say, the US gets past 50% EV adoption on the natural basis, and what I mean by that is without Robotaxi involved, is like 2034, 35. It's further out than I thought it would be, but that's like the 50% cross line. And what that means is that's where the curve is heading straight up. So to get to whatever 80% or more adoption doesn't take the same amount of time, because you're on the S curve. You're on that curve. But what will push that curve to be steeper will be Cybercab itself, or Robotaxi as a service, because suddenly, if you just look at, and in the United States, I think there's each year there's about 3.25 trillion road miles by vehicles. If Robotaxi starts, and Robotaxi, I think Elon said somewhere, or it's been said that Robotaxi's goal is about 10% of those miles, and clearly it will go over that. Clearly it'll go over that. But at 10%, you're talking about, I think to service that would be 3.5 or so million cars. So you're going to see these cars literally everywhere, and just the number entering the space is just. I mean, think about it this way: for every mile, I guess my broader point is, for every mile a person travels, if you don't assume expansion of travel, which I think with Robotaxi driving down cost per mile lower, people will move around more. But besides that, if you just think of it as a constant, what's likely to happen is people that were in the market for lower end cars, and we're talking U.S. market, but I mean it kind of translates everywhere, that were going to buy an ICE vehicle, some combustion vehicle from a Honda, a Toyota, etc., won't buy that car at all, and the replacement miles will be a Robotaxi. So you can expect that I think EV adoption will accelerate further.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be a very, very wild time for that. As I like to say on this channel, sheesh.
It is exciting, right? I mean, one of the reasons that it's from somebody, from my perspective, who spent, all my life on tech, I get very excited by technology stuff. I love it. And so it's just like a great thing. It's like being a kid in a candy store. You're investing in a company like Tesla, where it's all about this tech, so you can explore the space, and you're doing yourself a great service if you're exploring the space and you're going deep, because you're learning more about the company. I mean, I probably know more about FSD than all this is, and I'm trying to say this in a kind of humble sort of way. I mean, just a realistic way. I probably know more about FSD than probably everybody combined on Wall Street.
Yeah, I can believe that. I'm curious to know about this. And, there's a debate between, Lidar and, Tesla's FSD neural nets. And, us Tesla investors, we know, we know that, LiDAR, it's not competable. It can't compete with Tesla's FSD. Like, I heavily believe that LiDAR has no chance in competing with Tesla's FSD, even if price of the LiDAR comes down, because you have vision versus something that's pre-mapped. How is that even scalable? So I'm curious to know, why do you think the market can't see what we Tesla investors see when it comes down to Tesla's method of vision only compared to LiDAR, which is not scalable and not competitive at all?
Well, let's tease it out a bit technically. I've had some experience glancing over the shoulders of many people at Rivian with when we brought in different LiDAR sensors. And so what is LiDAR very good at? It's a light emitting radar. It is a system that emits kind of a laser type of light. I mean, a very narrow bandwidth type of light. And the reflectivity of that allows very precise measurement to objects. All right. Because it's a light emitting system, it's actually not awesome in rain, fog, or snow, because of all those things create scatter, right? It's trying to reflect back, and it's an active light emitting system. The argument some people make that it's good in rain, fog, or snow and cameras aren't, that would be better suited for radar, which can kind of push through that stuff. Here's what Tesla largely did. They used LiDAR in the early days as like training wheels on a bicycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea is they use it as a reference technology to make sure that the technologies that they were developing for perception on the camera tech in other words, they established ground truth through the LiDAR system, right? It became their measurement system. So it's like training wheels. Or another analogy would be like LiDAR was like labeling piano keys. You can do that in practice, but if you're going to go perform in front of an audience, you're going to take the labels off. Tesla did use LiDAR in the early days to get the training system off the ground, but they factored it out. And what I mean by that is what they did was they said, okay, look, we can use a bigger brain, and that is the neural net AI, to essentially interpret the camera data to give us the spatial awareness, the perception of both dynamic and static objects. And they figured that problem out by simply having a bigger brain. Like, in other words, they said, we'll lean in on the AI for that. And that allowed them to factor out what is a more expensive sensor system. And what I would say about LiDAR too is there's nothing bad inherent. And it doesn't have to be associated to a map-based system like Waymo. It's the idea of map matching. That's not like a necessary thing. You can take a LiDAR system and have it see or measure distance to objects, and with great precision. But the question is, do you need to? And if you don't need to, why would you? People assume, and I think improperly so, that more sensors is better, but that's not true. In engineering, there's this great principle called KISS, keep it simple, stupid. The more you add into these things, the more complex it becomes and the harder it is to decide where is ground truth. So you might even make the argument, well, why would you have a camera in other words, if you believed in LiDAR so strongly, then maybe you should remove all the other sensors, because then LiDAR becomes now obviously people recognize that LiDAR has some issues with the snow, rain, fog, etc. Yeah. But what Tesla has decided is, in a nutshell, to factor it out. And they are taking a more advanced approach to how they do their perception stack, which is basically an artificial intelligence model, so that they can remove that complexity from the system, right? And if they had LiDAR in the system, answer this: if you have LiDAR and you have cameras and they're operating concurrently and they disagree, who's the winner? Who's got the right answer? It's not obvious. It's not obvious. And what you have is this very complex decision framework. And it just leads to that complexity can lead to a greater number of accidents, because you might not have a system that you really, from an engineering point of view, have got your arms around. So this KISS principle, by basically factoring out the Lidar and just working on cameras with a bigger brain, that is their AI tech, I think is an appropriate and correct way to do a first principles engineering solution to a problem like this. It just removes a lot of complexity from the system. And I think that's ultimately a really, really good thing.
I'm just, not if we see how, Tesla's neural nets are, how much superior they are compared to LiDAR. And we're seeing other companies starting to understand that. Even NVIDIA is praising that as well. I don't know why Waymo is not shifting gear.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're doubling down.
It's a good question. I think what's happened here is they've built a very they've selected LiDAR to do a map matching plan, right? So what does this mean? They have high definition maps that they're largely creating, as part of the system that they've developed. And then they're map matching to that. And obviously there's a bunch of objects that are not in the maps. Obviously pedestrians aren't in the map. They're to be viewed in real time. But to say the distance to this curb is the distance on this, these lanes are this wide, all that's within their system. So what they're doing is they're using LiDAR to basically, determine where are we? Where is this car at this moment in time? And that allows it to then make its way. It's a perfectly appropriate solution, but it lacks, like what Tesla's done with FSD is the design principle here is the car should drive like a human. You and I, when we get in a car, if I were to enter, go to, I've never been to Alabama. I go to Alabama. I can drive a car. I can drive it anywhere. I may make some mistakes. There might be some local variances that I have to get used to. But generally speaking, the idea is that I know how to drive a car, relatively speaking. I understand the basic laws. There are a set of common laws that are across, common principles, common laws, and then there may be some local variation. But generally speaking, I can show up anywhere and drive a car. And that's the Tesla philosophy. It's that this car, can appear anywhere and drive anywhere, whether it's in China, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in, Waymo, of course, with their processes that they're not as scalable. So they're kind of more confined. They have to geofence where those cars can go. And what that means is that they're probably going to largely confine themselves to city, and their scale ramp will as they try to just expanding to another city is a slower process. Is it multi-magnitude slower than putting a Tesla out there? Maybe not, but it's definitely slower. So they've chosen this, and this is the path they've chosen. And it is not to say that perhaps they're working on a copy paste approach to what Tesla's done. But I think the other thing I think everyone needs to understand is that it isn't just cameras and a thing called a neural net. Okay, a neural net is the basic building block of the AI model that people are, from an AI perspective, people are using these neural nets. Tesla has a very specific design to this neural net. Now, I've tried to tease that out in some videos and some articles that I wrote on FSD, and I have one coming on kind of my latest thoughts. But Tesla engineering has built a very, very direct recipe for this. They have built a chocolate cake recipe. It's not generic. It's something special. It's something different. Their teams have spent years refining what is it to bring in driver data, appropriately auto-label that data, build a system that can drive itself and make those decisions. It's not cookie cutter. You're not going to find it anywhere. It's not some system that's just cameras and AI and pop, you have a solution. It's multi years of engineering discipline and effort, try and fail. And when people hear what Tesla has done, people could read every single one of my technical articles on it and still not build a system even close to what they have, because it's all proprietary. And there's a lot of technique in those, there's a lot of nuance. And I'd say it's the nuance that's all about. It's not the fact that it is a neural net. That's sort of just, base level stuff. That's like saying a chocolate cake has chocolate. So what? Why does this chocolate cake taste so much better than this chocolate cake? And somebody says, well, it's a secret recipe. Oh, but it has chocolate in it, so I should be able to recreate it, right? Good luck.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a really good way. That's a really good way. Good analogy for that. What's your stock price prediction for 2030? And a lot of people,
It's
they
great.
love these stock price predictions. Curious to know what yours is. I think we talked about it in the chat, but I'll let
Yeah.
you take the floor on this one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my general idea is that we have a $200 stock that will be a $2,000 stock. It is clearly a stock. If most things go right, and I think they will, there'll be a lot of noise in the system, and there'll be some timeline deltas here too. And I want to talk a bit about that in a second. That's why I'm not giving you a time, because to me, that can be 2030 or 2035. But in either case, I'm reasonably happy. It is possible that the stock could be 20x where it is today. I mean,
Oh,
consider this. What is Nvidia today? Is, I don't know, give or take $100 a share. I don't know. Maybe it's
yeah.
115. I think in November of 2022, it was like $13 a share.
Oh,
I forget the specific day, but that stock. This is 2022, right? We're only in 2025. I
it's
mean,
insane.
we're not that many years out from that. That stock is increased by an order of magnitude. And
Yeah.
if you look at, this is not to take away from Nvidia. I think it's an unbelievably great company, and I have an investment in Nvidia as well. But I'd say that it's a bit more of a one-trick pony, in the sense that if you look at Tesla's product pipeline, you have energy, transportation, labor, really
Yes.
the three largest industries on planet Earth. And you also have them doing compute. So, I mean, they're building their own compute. So NVIDIA is great, amazing company, terrific company, deserves all the growth it's seen, our stock appreciation and Graceland growth it's seen. It's a bit more of a narrow play in terms of all the future places that Tesla can participate in. So it's easy for me to see Tesla as 10x, and I can
Mhm.
run this back through math as well. I think that based on Robotaxi alone, the stock is 10x where it is. That's not to,
I
and that
agree.
doesn't include Optimus, which is the part that I'm most interested in, and I think has the most value for Tesla ultimately. But yeah, so I don't know. Let's say 10x 2032 at the latest.
I can see that happening too. The bot, I mean, we'll do a bot video separately. We'll do another podcast just talking about the bot, because that really hurts my brain when I talk about it
Yeah.
and when I try to understand it. It's just like my thesis when I invested in Tesla, it was because of the Robotaxi and FSD back
Mhm.
in 2020, and seeing it actually come to life. It's a good feeling. It's a really, really good feeling. And
Right.
I agree with the fact that the stock can be worth 10x because of Robotaxi alone. The last question I got for you, Phil. Can't believe it's
Yes.
already over an hour. It's insane. It doesn't feel like it honestly doesn't feel like it's been an hour. That's the crazy part. But for someone who knows software very well, like yourself, and they see what's coming and what's about to happen, what is your message to those investors who are thinking of selling Tesla stock right before Robotaxi launch? I only ask this because some YouTubers, I don't want to name anyone,
Mhm.
and they're respectable YouTubers in the finance community, who recently owned a lot of stock, has sold his entire position because of failing fundamentals of autos and other things that really don't matter when when we look at the future growth of Tesla.
Mhm.
And that creates a lot of, I would say, more uncertainty, because this person is very credible. I respect the guy. I don't want to, put his name out, but it doesn't make sense to me to sell the stock right before robo taxis. But for someone like you who knows what's coming, who knows what's happening, who knows what the software is, and who is also a very heavy Tesla investor and is this calm, you're very calm. I love it. What's your message to those investors who are thinking of maybe selling the stock or maybe aren't confident? I know we talked about Elon and him being a big part of the noise and such. What's your
Well, I mean,
message
I
to
think
them? Yeah.
I think there's a couple things to say here. This would be like seeing the iPhone moment and discarding
Hmm.
Apple because you think they're a personal computer company.
Hmm.
It's Tesla is transitioning its business dramatically from auto to autonomy. I don't expect that. There's a good chance that Tesla will not sell autos to consumers in a number of years from now. The business will be too
Mm.
small. The
Oh
business
yeah.
will be too small, and frankly, it's a difficult business. It is a difficult business. There's a lot of physical components to it, and ultimately, it's lower margin than these other software style business. I mean, it's great to be in the software business. Microsoft proved that very well to the world, as opposed to, you know, full hardware. It's great when you marry hardware to software like Apple did and saw, you know, a huge win and a category killing product because of incredible integration. But I think, you know, where we're at is we have a couple things going on. Is that most of the world thinks of Tesla as an automotive company. Fair,
Yeah.
fair. They don't, you know, if you asked your average person something about Megapack and energy and you know, what's going on, and they wouldn't even know that even exists or is part of Tesla. So Tesla to the world's an auto company for the most part. That's how Wall Street typically views Tesla today. But that would be like Wall Street looking at Apple and saying, well, you know, I saw this new thing called iPhone, and maybe it'll get 2% of the sales or something. But so we have to keep looking at the personal computer side of the business. And great companies reinvent themselves. They put themselves out of business. It's really, really hard to do that. You know, it would be hard for me to make any decision, no matter what's coming out of my mouth right now. If I was an executive, I think I'd have weaker knees and say, oh, we should exit the auto business or something like that. I mean, it'd be like, wow, we're making a lot of money here. Let's keep going. But there's a point when Robotaxi revenues overwhelm the auto business by far. And then there'll be a point where Optimus overwhelms that business by far. So, you know, I think that would be my message. The other point that is more subtle is that a lot of people see Elon, criticize Elon, saying that he misses timelines. He misses, you know, he's, you know, here's how I'd respond to that. I do not think in the core of Elon's being that he is trying to be deceptive. I think he is patterned after every awesome engineer I've ever met. They are perennial optimists. They want to see, I mean, in one level, they have a lot of pessimism. Anything they're going to functionally do might fail, so they're building a great solution. But in terms of the overall product, they have a lot of optimism. They see a path to something that doesn't exist. Elon is like that. He's walking ahead of us, and he believes these things. I think that there's a difference between being optimistic and maybe missing, to elongating a timeline, than being deceptive or lying. And I do not think that Elon has any purposeful act of deception. I think he is just simply an optimist, believes in this very strongly, and pushes his teams to extreme limits, and nothing is good enough for the man. So, you know, that means that I'm sure he felt that all truth and goodness in FSD should have been there in version 12. And then reality hit, and they decided they needed a 13 to get that next step. And reality hits, and to build the first unsupervised, they realized they need a version 14. And it looks like there's this ever elongating timeline. But the important point here is that at some point, these things converge. And when they do, all these, however you want to build motivation behind what Elon says, all disappears. It's like anybody that was trying to believe in his reusable rocket program with Falcon had all these things. Look where it is today. Look where it is today. So that is what is absolutely, with great degree of confidence for me, FSD is on the path to convergence. It is a solution. It will solve self-driving. It is pretty much there. And people can doubt that, and they can throw whatever shade at that as long as they want. But the problem with that analysis is that sometimes, and actually most of the time, these things eventually happen. And when they do, and you were sitting on the sidelines pissing and moaning about it, now you've missed out. And when you've missed out, now you can react one of two ways. You can either decide to recognize your own limits and join the party, or you can be a perma critic. And a lot of these people end up in that camp. They just sort of like they can't believe that they were wrong about their opinions of these things, and then they're always throwing lob balls in forever, and they'll never be right, but somehow that gives them some satisfaction, unfortunately.
That's exactly it. For me, if there's any, I don't know, for me, I cover Tesla literally on a daily basis, and I feel like I'm on a repeat, just saying the same thing over and over again. This is a long-term investment. This is something that you aren't putting in for the next week, for the next month, for the next year. You're putting it in for a long time. Now, if you timed it correctly and bought the stock in 2019, well, that's just luck. You came at the right time. But that's hard to, that's like maybe a 1% chance of doing. The best thing you can do is just hold long term and believe in the products. Like someone like Phil and I, we believe in the products. And someone like Phil, who has a lot of experience in software, can see it, he knows. And that gives me more confidence to buy more stock, actually. So
I often have to say to myself, what are the facts that I know and what do I see? I use this word often, convergence. Where do I see convergence? I don't have a crystal ball as to timelines. Things I think I've said to many people, I said, if I'm wrong, it's only based on time. And some people might say, well, that's a terrible thing from an investing point of view because opportunity cost, you could have been somewhere else. But I can't know when it's going to pop. And Tesla's a very volatile stock. And when it pops, it's going to go straight uphill.
crazy,
So yeah, so I think that where we all can get this wrong is our optimism translates into compression of time, and we're ahead of the curve, and we're in earlier than we could be, and folks that are not paying attention can come in later and make money, good money too, and that will happen. And some will have that strategy. They'll say, I want to see it. They don't care if they get in at 500 when they think it's going to 5,000, because that's when they see that that FOMO moment has occurred and that they're not so worried about being on the left side of it. They just want to be in the moment where they see it getting pulled. For me, I want to get in on before that moment occurs.
Yeah.
But I think if anything, what us Tesla optimists, retail investors, or bullish Tesla folks will get wrong is timing. But our timing probably, unless we're extremely optimistic, probably won't be more than a year out. So there are people out there saying that Robotaxi won't be a big deal to 2040. They're insane, because the reality is either it will be a complete flop or it will be a complete success. The chance of it taking a linear glide path is completely wrong. It's either going to climb an S curve or it's never going to get on that curve to start with. Exactly. It won't be that straight line approach that you hear a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very good point. That's an extremely very good point. One thing we did not get a chance to talk about on this podcast is the Optimus bot, which is your thesis on going heavy on Tesla, but we'll leave that for another podcast. Because right now, over almost an hour and a half, which is,
oh boy.
we can go on for another hour and a half. That's the crazy part, but it's a pleasure. Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. But thank you, Phil, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And everyone, I recommend you guys to follow him on X, link in the description. He does amazing articles. Even Elon Musk takes notes of it. So it's good stuff. Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in the next few podcasts.
Sounds good.
Take care. Thank you.